I want to bring in Tali Farhadian-Weinstein, former federal and state prosecutor, and Danya Perry, former deputy chief of the criminal division for the Southern District of New York. Ladies, not the indictments that we thought we would be talking about this evening. Throw out the bingo card. Let's first talk about the charges. One count, willful retention of national defense information, maximum sentence of 10 years. Let's set that aside for the moment. 2 counts, conspiracy to obstruct justice related to deleting the security camera footage, maximum sentence of 20 years. Put this, Danya, if you would, in the context of the other charges that Trump is facing for Mar-a-Lago. When we say superseding, we all often think these are more serious. Are they?
No, they're as serious, but the more charges that are added, and particularly I think the obstruction type charges, the worse it gets for the defendants. The one additional retention of classified documents charge is serious because so much has been said and so much ink has been spilled about this particular document that was not only retained, but according to reporting and according to the indictment, was actually disseminated in Bedminster. That is going to be a very important piece of evidence at trial. It also, charging it, ensures that that recording and testimony about it will come in. I think otherwise there might have been an argument about whether it fits a pattern. Now it will come in, and that's devastating. And of course, the destruction of evidence charges, known as spoliation in the business, are equally devastating. It really does go to, a lot has been said about consciousness of guilt, but prosecutors love evidence that shows a guilty mind, especially for the former president, who usually says whatever is on his mind, and that's usually his best gambit. Here, clearly there was concealment and even destruction, and that is generally quite fatal.
Well, we don't actually know whether the security footage was tampered with at this juncture, right? That's not actually in the indictment, Tali. There's a suggestion they wanted to do it. There are gaps. But as yet, we don't know. That sort of seems to be beside the point. It's the intention that's enough, right?
Exactly. It's totally beside the point because they wanted to destroy it. And as Danya said, you don't want to destroy something unless you thought what you were doing on that tape was wrong. And so they're serious charges on their own, but they kind of cast an extra cloud over everything else, or sort of back up all of the other charges. They really tell you that he knew that what he had done in retaining those documents in Mar-a-Lago was wrong, and he wanted to erase the record.
Well, and I think as the public has to be sort of shown the reasons why this matters, the idea that there's the IT guy and the valet are huddling in the audio room, stepping away from the office, this remains between the two of us. I mean, it is out of, like, it's a conspiracy in the most obvious sense, right? And the suggestion in the document and the indictment is that Trump knew about was monitoring all of this all along. That seemed very pointed to me, the inclusion of the conversations with Trump. Do you read it that way, Tali?
Absolutely. The reference to the boss sort of monitoring this entire situation and them reporting back to him and them stating over and over again what his desires were. The boss wants to see this destroyed. And that is really damning evidence against him.
But, okay, so my second question, though, is, Danya, the boss wanting this stuff deleted, is that, I'm not a lawyer, is that circumstantial, though? Because it's not a direct conversation with Donald Trump. It's someone saying, the boss wants this deleted. Does that matter, that if they don't have someone on the record saying, Trump told me to delete it? It's basically an interlocutor saying the boss wants it deleted.
No, that will come in because there are conspiracy counts here and there's a scheme that's alleged. Statements that in a civil trial would be considered hearsay can come in against the defendant. So that should come in. I'll note a lot is riding on employee number 4, clearly, who is, I won't even say cooperating because it's not clear he did anything wrong. He is giving testimony and evidence. Clearly, the government is going to want for this new defendant, Mr. De Oliveira, to cooperate as well, because otherwise it doesn't seem like, you know, this indictment is chock full of recordings and documents, and clearly there's cell phone records and there's signal conversations. There's a lot of documentary record evidence here, but that conversation, which is so critical, is a verbal one. And it relies, again, on employee number 4. And so that's, I won't say it's a weak point, but it's something that clearly the government will want to shore up as much as possible.
Is this an indictment as much for Trump as it is to flip Walt Nauta? I mean, it just seems to me, at one point, Tali, it seemed like, okay, Walt Nauta's utility as a cooperating witness has diminished. With this, it sort of seems like Walt Nauta's back in the catbird seat, and that, there's so much pressure on him. He's so clearly in the center of this, as, for lack of a better term, a henchman to carry out Trump's plot. Do you think this increase, I mean, if you're his lawyer, are you saying now it's time to talk to the DOJ, sir?
Yeah, well, look, if I were the DOJ, I would want Nauta or de Oliveira on the witness stand, giving the story, narrating all of the documents and all the different things that we've talked about. It's always just much better to have somebody kind of tell the story live. And I actually think what we're seeing here is that there was an attempt to get de Oliveira to cooperate, because the new charges against him that have to do with his false statements to the FBI in January are so obviously false. That's not like
they have a transcript of them, and they're just blatantly lies.
Yeah, and sometimes, you interview somebody and they tell you something that you don't realize at the time is false, and it takes time to figure out that they were lying. But here, he says, I don't know anything about moving anything anywhere in Mar-a-Lago. He almost says, I've never even been to Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it's that.
What's Mar-a-Lago?
Security footage that he tried to delete.
Yes.
He knows that they have him. That's what we were talking about before. It makes sense.
So they've had that hanging over him all this time. And so that tells me they've been in conversation with him saying, we can charge you with this.
Yeah.
And not to mention all the other stuff if you don't come along. And either they gave up on him because they've decided he wasn't credible, they couldn't use him on the stand, or he decided to give up on them to, stick with Trump.
Chance it with Trump.
Hope for a pardon, if all the things happen that would put Trump in a position to pardon him. And when those negotiations broke down is when they had to bring these extra charges, even if it means, as it does, that this is going to delay the case.
Oh, well, okay. Just put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
I gotta ask, we talk about employee number 4. We don't know if he's a cooperating witness, but I'm saying the early reporting is that employee number 4 is Yuscil Taveras, who is the head of the IT department at Mar-a-Lago. He is being represented by Stanley Woodward, who is also Walt Nauta's lawyer, who is being paid for by Donald Trump's super PAC, or has been paid by Trump's super PAC. That seems interesting to me, Danya, right? I mean, if one of his clients is potentially cooperating witness and the other is diametrically opposed to him, legally speaking, how do you represent both of them without a conflict of interest?
I don't know. There's a conflict there. As far as we can tell, looking from the outside, that's a clear conflict. And I'd be surprised if that's not raised by the prosecution and they don't ask the judge for what's called a cursio hearing. But it's really to decide objectively whether or not there is, in fact, a conflict. And so I think that's one of the things we can probably look to see.
There are so many question marks and so many more questions that I have, including everything you just raised. So, Danya, thank you so much for your time. Tali, please hang with us.